Hello and welcome to the Sacred Science of Succeeding. I'm Byron Woodson, your host, and I'll be walking you through this. This is the second recording for maybe about a 14 step or session course about spirituality and how you can make it more practical in your life. And it's like 5 in the morning, so I don't know why I'm up, but I do know that I'm going to be much more animated than I was last time because somebody told me they were falling asleep, and I don't want you to fall asleep. Even though you are touching the waters of new, the infinite reality, etc. Let's get you awake. So, what we're going to cover here, to give you a sense of what the whole thing is about, it is a course on spirituality, and we're breaking down a couple of important things. We have four kind of stages. We have the infinite, the conceptual, the perceptual, and the energetic and material. And those are broken down into space, time, and energy. And we have a couple of things that we do at each stage of manifestation, creation, that if we don't do them, we won't succeed. If we do them, we will succeed. And mostly, we'll succeed if we do enough of them in the right order. Then we don't have to go back and do other things over again. This course, or today, we'll be talking about the infinite up here. So that is us, the infinity of existence and the infinity of our potential as individual humans and part of a collective history and hopefully the future. So, just to kind of contextualize what we talked about last time, in case I post this video and it's just this video that you see. I use the example of building a building. So I think I use the example of having a couple, and then we have them broken down into the steps. So the first step would be they decide that they want a new home. Somebody wants a commercial complex. They want apartments. They want to build something. So then they choose the location. They go contact the surveyor, and the surveyor says this location is good. It has bedrock. It's not on shaky ground. It's not sandy. It won't get washed away, etc. The home insurance is going to not be a whole lot of money. It's not on a floodplain, so they figure out the groundworks of whatever's going on, on top of which they're going to build. Then they'll talk to an architect who says, okay, on top of this, I can build this scale of a building. So, otherwise we'll have to shore up the bed, shore up the soil, compact the soil, all that stuff to make sure that the building doesn't fall down or lean like the Tower of Pisa. After that, after they talk to the architect to figure out the design that they want. So they say, okay, I want, a building of this size, this shape, with this much greenery on the outside. I need the layout to be like this. I need these rooms, this capacity, etc. So the architect then draws up blueprints, and the person says yes. The architect sends them to the central bureau that says yes, you can build this type of building because of zoning laws, etc. It's connected to utilities, then or not connected to utilities, so they have to build, etc. And then once all that's done, then they go find what they call an architectural engineer. Architects and architectural engineer may be the same person or may not. So the architectural engineer takes the blueprints and then turns those into, okay, I need the windows to be this thick to protect against the sun or the cold. I need, this much of an HVAC system that's heating, ventilation, air, and cooling, I believe. All of the details of, the number of studs you need, how much load the building can take, if there's a parking garage, all of the things that are, it's the physical, engineering physics of the building. After that, they say, okay, cool. They hand it off to the construction manager who says, okay, these are the things I need. We're going to build this. I get all the cement done first, so we're going to order the cement trucks to come in after the diggers to dig out the place and blah, blah. So they just put everything into a particular sequence, and then once the sequence is down, they hand that off to a general contractor who is then responsible for identifying the specific companies and so forth that's going to get the work done, scheduling them to come on site, do the things, blah blah blah. And then once the building's built, we have the interior designer who you might have contacted before with the blueprints, right? You know, to come in and get all the furniture and, you know, the paints and the colors and pick the textures of the floors and the ceilings and the walls and all that stuff. You know, the chandeliers and the light switches, they come in and make that pretty. And once that's set, the company or couple hires movers to get all of the materials, you know, the tools, like couches, chairs, vacuum cleaners, tables. And what's that stuff in the kitchen? Refrigerators, yeah, that type of stuff. Move it into the place so you can use. Then you go in, move in, you live and work in it. So these are, this is the sequence of creation. It happens on the grand scale. It happens when you want to build a building. It happens when you want to, do anything of scale, at scale, right? So there's the esoteric and, let's see, this is the because I'm backwards, right? So I got to figure that out. So there's the esoteric and the exoteric. Let's not worry about the direction. The esoteric is the internal states and ways of being. And the exoteric is kind of what, how we talk about what happens outside of us. So when you intend for something and that turns into something real, other people can say, oh, that's a design. And when you're trying to just, figure out whether this is good for you, whether the situation is appropriate, what you can get or cannot get done, you're trying to be discerning. You're judging the situation according to criteria set in the intentions. And outside of you, in the building industry, they call that a survey, right? Then, under the survey, we have draft the blueprint, right? And then engineer a solution, supply the goods, build the thing, present this for, opening, transfer the operation, transfer the ownership and, move things from place to place and operate the thing, and then it works. But internally, we don't actually have these activities that other people can point to. We have like ways and intentions or leanings, ways of being that we have. So for the esoteric description, we have intend, discern, form, organize, plan, compose, arrange, convey, and attend. So this is trying to show both the internal and external, esoteric and exoteric, spiritual and material, or spiritual and mundane aspects of the same thing. So what we're concerned about here today is the intend, discern, form, and design, survey, draft. We're going to talk about the infinite reality that we experience, and we're going to talk about the infinite potential that we have to modify and affect that reality. So the four kind of things we'll touch on, the infinity, I'll call it existence's origin story. We're going to talk about existence, the nature of it, and aspects of existence itself. We're going to talk about being, like we're living beings. So how do we be inside of the context of space, time, and energy? And then we're also going to talk about subjective, what we experience for in that ground of infinite reality when we're connected to it. So what we were talking about before were Taoism, Kabbalah, and the stuff in Kemet. So what we're mostly going to be talking about is the upper regions of things, right? In Taoist cosmology, we have WuJi, Tai Chi, and Yin Yang, right? And the Kabbalah and chakras, I forget what the crown chakra and the other one is called, but we're talking about Keter and Metatron, Bina and what's the other one? Not Chesed. Man, I keep forgetting. But, that's fine. And in the Kemetic system, we're going to be talking Ra, Amun, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut. And, yeah. And we're not going to be talking about the Aglo. I just did it anyhow. Cool. So if you wanted to get a glance at all of this, a little more specifically, what we have is the internal and external. We have the Kemetic names and the Ifa or Yoruba deities in here. And then we have the Sagittarius, Aquarius, and Capricorn. That's the zodiac and the planets. Cool. So existence's origin story. So hopefully what you see here is a dot, right? So, a lot of our conversations about God and, the infinity of existence and our universe or whatever happens in the context of us experiencing this grand reality. But before we get into that, I want to think like, if we were God and we were in this infinite, undifferentiated expanse, outside of time, outside of space, if that's possible, outside of energy. Like, we created energy, we created space, we created time. But before those existed, there had to be some infinite, undifferentiated media. So, depending on the cosmology or basically the story goes, God was bored. She was like I'm just here. I need something to play with. So I'm going to create beings, i.e. humans, sentient beings. It could be octopi, right? And they want to, create beings that I can experience, doing stuff in the world. Like, I want to have some fun. Create games, inhabit worlds, take over lands, fight, no war, don't kill, right? But outside of that, God's infinite. And inside of that infinity, she created a space that says, okay, inside of this, I'm going to create, existence, reality. And that's what this dot is. To us, inside of the dot, i.e. the universe, it's massive. But inside, outside of it, God's like, okay, I'm just going to take a little piece. Right? Just this little piece, and I'm going to, circumscribe this little thing and create some system that I can then put my consciousness into and experience myself creating again and again and again all the time. Right now we're up to like 7.5 billion people, so there's 7.5 gods walking the earth, not accounting plankton and amoeba or whatever. But so I just wanted to kind of pull back from the different cosmologies, talking about in the beginning there was God, who God was, whether God, but whatever spiritual system you're from, our existence is just a minuscule thing. Like, if you think of a grain of sand inside of the vast expanse of the universe, that's how big and significant we are inside of God's existence. So yeah. Now, so usually what happens is we have different cosmologies that kind of explain this story. In the Bible over here on the left, we have, in the beginning there was God, right? Then God said, let there be light. Which, can be, light is a literal interpretation. Let's just think maybe electricity, right? Energy or something. Something's move, right? I'm going to create some moving thing, and when I create the light, there's also dark, because there's light and then there's not light. And when you create from that infinite expanse a thing, then what happens is three things start existing. So there's the infinite expanse, there's the thing that you create, and then there's the combination of the two. Holy Trinity, right? Let's get deep. So you have the light and then the dark, right? And then that's all the whole complete inside of the background. In Egyptian cosmology, we're talking about the waters of Nu, creating Shu and Tefnut. And the process of creating they call Ptah or something like that. And then, in the Bible we say, light and day, and, light and day was created, and our experience of light, our experience of light and dark is day and night. We're going around the world, and then there was the second day. And in Taoist cosmology, we have the infinite expanse, that's WuJi, and then you create like a little thing, and I think that's, they would call that Taiji. And then you have the duality of light and dark, and then you have the process of the interaction between light and dark, which is the yin and the yang, right? So kind of the same, big picture story going And if we want to get scientific about it, so we have the Einstein's general theory of relativity, where we have this infinite thing that breaks into space and time and energy and matter. So space and time, the darkness, because we can't see space and time, but we can see the light, which is energy and matter. You can see my finger on the screen. You can see the light pushing out of the screen onto you, because it's not just like a receptacle reflecting on the things around you. And so that's the light and the dark. And then we have space and time divided into things. We'll go into this a little more. And then we have energy and matter. And another way to talk about this, because we didn't actually have these words pre-general theory of relativity, we have the symbolic way of talking about it in terms of water, air, earth, and fire. So water is gravity, like the infinite force that kind of is the solvent. Just like water is, they call it the universal solution, because you pour anything into water, it starts to break apart eventually. So gravity is the force that breaks things apart, going back down to the undifferentiated state. And then you have magnetism, which is a little more specific between two things. We can talk about that as air, right? In Earth, we have the physical, that's matter, boom, boom, boom. And then we have the animation that we experience, animation, spirituality, electricity, fire, all kind of the same thing, representing some active force going on in the world. So when you think of these, or hear these, earth, fire, air, water, like, they're your last airbender, they're metaphors for primordial forces going on in the world. So, yeah, respect that. Now, let's get down to kind of the core fundamentals of it all, simply because it's fun to talk about, right? So we have the standard model of of quantum physics. There's actually another model. If I was on my P's and Q's, I would have a picture of that. So let me pause this recording and go get one. Hey, I'm over here now. We're back. Yeah, so I just had to go grab a little diagram. We'll see that in a second. But before we get into that, because it's more a spatial relationship that's going on there now, we're talking about quark level phenomenon, subatomic physics. So you can see that we have atoms, and inside of atoms are neutrons and protons, and those are made of quarks. So there's some complex physics going on. There's a lot of relationships between up quarks and down quarks and so forth. So basically, when the infinite reality created our existence, they didn't go, okay, let me make a planet. What they did is they created some mathematical and spatial relationships and said, oh, okay, cool, go. And then, universe blew up into the Big Bang. And based on the random distribution or not so random distribution of these, and some of them were attracted to others in a certain frequency. They became, some became these type of chemicals. Others, they were closer to together, so they attracted to each other, and they were these type of chemicals. The sun, it has this big energy creation force. Like there's so much force that like a atom or something or a photon takes like 10,000 years to get from the center all the way out. So it's super dense in there. Yeah, larger stars with more matter and more energy, blah, 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 blah. So, so the Big Bang, the scientific Big Bang is talking or looking at how all of these dispersed into the universe. Cool. So this is a presentation of that. We're not going to get all into this, but it's fun to think about and to understand how this works in terms of when we're talking about we're part of infinity. Like infinity created Earth, infinity created matter, infinity created energy and all of that jazz. So when people say, you're, okay. When people say you're part of infinity and you're experiencing God and things like that, then that's what they're talking about. Okay. Be with you in a second. I had to undo the presentation. Yeah. There we go. And this is a representation made for a movie in 2013. It's just cool, and I put it here because it just looks like the Zodiac, right? Or not. But anything, you want to, you can present like this in a way. But the standard model of physics is also presented like this. There's, two sides where we have up gluons and down leptons and all types of things. But I just wanted to show you some type of spatial relationship. We're not going to go into what these mean or the implications are because, frankly, I don't know. But if you go to Quantum Magazine and look for the standard model of particle physics, then you'll see this diagram, and it's an interactive 3D thing. So there's, you can turn it and shape it, or you can turn it and twist it to look at it from different perspectives. Cool. So that happens, and you have all these energy particles that exist inside of the context of space and time. So let's talk about space real quick. Space, 3 dimensions. Depth, breadth, length, right? Lots of in there. So X, Y, and Z axis. So what happens at any point, any point in the grid, you can locate something. So there's no real center to the grid. Like there's a center to the universe, and there's a center to Earth. There's a center to our solar system, etc. And so then there's a center of your center of gravity in your body, and you can understand things in terms of these different centers. And those centers are then possibly different coordinate systems. So when you're walking around, there's forward, backward, up, down. When you think about Earth, there's north, east, south, and west. And when you think about the zodiac, it's you're in this point relative to Orion rather. This star, the planet, this zodiac sign, etc. So there are coordinate systems that you can use. But outside of those coordinate systems, there is just infinite space. And we lay on top of that a coordinate system to allow us to figure out where we are, what's happening around us, how far things are from us, how long it will take to get places, etc. So, space is the infinite ground, right? We participate in it. We can't not participate in it. So you're always walking around God's property, right? Who owns this? God. Now, inside of that, when we had the Big Bang, God put energy into space. And that energy then blew up over time. So, just to get a little mystical with you, I started thinking about all of these representations of, circles and mandalas as the seed, or it's the seed of the Big Bang, or these representations. So people would think about the 3-dimensional nature of this diagram and how it would look, from a perspective, and things like that, and then they might derive the tree of life, or see a particular mandala, or Mandelbrot set, a fractal, or whatever going on, and that's cool, right? But it can't be as homogeneous as this, because otherwise the universe would be homogeneous, right? Like if it was all the same thing. So God had to create, or imbue, or put in a little bit of instability in, just to see how things would mess up. So they might have moved one thing over here by 4 centimeters, and then that is what created the world and existence that we live in. So for us, it's like, oh, all this complex stuff, and for God it'd be like, okay, I'm gonna just move this over here to create a little bit of instability, and that out of that instability, then comes our universe or multiverse, depending on whether you're an MCU or DC fan. Now, okay, so what was happening here is, we have the energy inserted, and then boom, and then over time, what happens is that particle changes position. So space happens, right? Particle goes from here to there, and it's not instantaneous. Or it might be all instantaneous from God's perspective. Or instantaneous doesn't matter because God experiences all of time simultaneously, right? So from our perspective, that movement is not instantaneous. We experience the relative change in position as a sequence of time. So, if I go like this as a metronome, I can actually count time according to how decent this, regular this metronome is. Happens with clocks, happens cycles around the sun, etc. But so we mark time in terms of changes of space, and even down to the vibrations of, I think it's like the cesium or cesium atom for universal time. So they found an atom and it shakes a particular number of vibrations per second. So they count the vibrations and like, that's a second. Count the vibrations, that's a second. Count the vibrations, that's a second. So, and that's still a change in position in time. So they're counting the number of changes in positions, rather changes in positions in space, and marking that as a particular time. So that's what happens in the abstract infinite spiritual field. Now, when they create, or when Nu, or she, or whatever you want to call her, created existence, that part of the property is gravity. So what happens is, at any point in time, where were we? Let's see. Go back to here. So at any point in time, or any point in space, when she put in this energy that then moves, it actually also exerts a gravitational pull on the field around it. I'm not going to say space because I particularly think of space as an abstract, non-dimensional thing, like this abstract grid on top of which, but apparently space is not abstract. So when a photon goes around a planet, then it doesn't just go straight, or it bends. So planets and suns with their gravitational pull affect the matter around them, and that gravitational pull is represented here, where you have I guess M is magnetism, but I got it because it just kind of decently represented the gravitational pull of any particular energy particle. So boom. And then as it goes around, that little photon, that energy particle, the gluon, the body, the galaxy, and whatever, exerts a gravitational pull on the world around it, or the space around it, or the things happening inside of the space around it. This is really hard to discuss because I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm just trying to make sense of all of these things that we see in popular, and then integrate them in a way that we can understand what's going on in the world around us, and so we can start becoming creators of our own lives. We'll get to that. So this happens as every single particle moves around. It exerts a gravitational force as at the same time that it inserts energy into that field or that area. So while we say there's a gravitational pull and there's matter, you have to also realize that matter exists, like the energy of matter is a positive force that is inserting into an undifferentiated medium. And those positive forces then work on, each other and interact with each other. And then, that same rotation that you saw in the previous happens, planets curve around the sun. This is just a repeating visualization that I picked up off of, Google Images. But I also wanted to say, because I thought it was cool, because people don't believe in astrology. And what I want to say is, modern scientists and astronomers have proved that, planets and the sun bend energy. So, Earth gives off a magnetic field. It has an ionosphere, etc., etc. So, some of Earth's energy is always projecting into the medium around it. Same with Saturn, same with Jupiter, blah, 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 blah. So what happens is those can be seen as, I think it's convex focusers. When energy is going past, like let's say my head is as big as a planet. The energy going past doesn't go straight. The energy going past will feel the gravitational pull and then curve a little bit and then eventually converge. So that process of converging may be a way to explain the subtle energies coming from the zodiac and being focused around that planet and aiming at us and hitting the Earth. So this is why, when Mars is in Aries or Aquarius or Cancer and whatnot, it has a particular effect that is, with or without, in contrast with whatever that energy field is, etc. So, so boom. That's my rationalization for if there was going to be a astronomical explanation of the zodiac and astrology. That would be it. I don't know. What do you think? Put in the comments below. All right, cool. Now, also going on is apparently the what's his name? The astronomers are figuring out that not only is the universe getting bigger, space is spacing apart. I don't really have much to say about that, but just wanted to throw that. Not only is the universe exploding, the space around the universe is exploding too. It's like a double whammy. All right. There's a great video. We're not going to watch it here. It's called Powers of 10. It is a fantastic exploration of, down to the minutest particles up to the size of the universe. It's 9 minutes long, and you can go watch that on YouTube. And because YouTube has these crazy letters, this is actually the YouTube letters for, the actual thing. Well, you can just search Powers of 10. It was created in 1977. It's pretty cool. So actually, go watch that. Pause this, go watch that, come back. Oh, you're back. Cool. Thanks. Okay, cool. So, pull back out. Hey, this is space-time. We were talking about the context and the contours of space and time and how, our universe, however vast, is just minuscule compared to, the infinite existence of God, Yahweh, the Neter, divine, etc. Cool. So back to the infinite spiritual field. And, we have the four primordial forces, fire, earth, air and water, not in the sequence that I would have liked it to be. But since I didn't create it, oh well. And then what we're going to talk about is consciousness, identity, existence, and then a little bit of sight, sound, and feeling. Okay, cool. So we had a diagram 2 or 3 slides ago of this, background with that little black dot, and now we have day, or that was, light and darkness or whatever. Now we have this infinite black background with like something, right? So this is kind of how my internal visual experience goes when I think about things. So I'll close my eyes and I'll see this infinite expanse, and there's not really light. Of course, there's a light on. It's my light, right? I'm ready for my close-up. There's this light on, but when it's dark and my eyes are shut, I don't actually see much. I can visualize things. I can type things. We'll get into these details, but close your eyes. You have this infinite expanse, and inside of that infinite expanse, just like God created, this energy in the world, you can also create a shape. So you can imagine, like my favorite thing to imagine is a Rubik's Cube, because it's symmetrical, has a couple colors, and I can move it and rotate it. So there's actually some, we're not going to get into this now. That's going to be more in the conceptual mental function. We're get into the shape and rotation of things. But right now we're just talking about like having a thing that may be identifiable if we think about it long enough. So like we have a thought or an intention, and if we keep it there, it might take a shape, it might take a form, etc. It might be an Egyptian pyramid. It might not. So in this infinite expanse, we play the role of God. We create our own experience and reality when we close our eyes. Spirituality is, or at least my interpretive spirituality is the process of getting that intention that we create inside and having it exist in the world. Sounds cool. So when we do this, a couple of things are kind of fundamental to that. So the first is we kind of have to assume that we're a conscious being that is separate from what it is that we're imagining, and both of us exist. Like we can't get out. Like these are what they call axiomatic, fundamental principles that you can't like get out. You can't be like, oh, okay, I'm imagining something, and I don't exist. Well, that's kind of paradoxical and contradictory. I'm imagining something, but it doesn't exist. Well, your imagination of the thing exists, even though the thing might not exist. Like, I can imagine a cup in my hand. The cup doesn't exist, but my imagination of the cup exists. So a lot of life is intentional hallucinations. Yeah, let's be real about it. Okay, so inside of this infinite ground, we can create anything, and a lot of mystical practices, they want you to get to a place where you can experience this, and and inside of this context you can create an intention that you can then fulfill. So the hard part is shutting off all of the external sensory information and slowing down through specific breathing practices the amount of information that you create and experience in your brain. And based on the rhythms of your breathing, the depth of your breathing, etc., you can slowly but surely experience less and less of what's going on in the outside world and your inside world. And inside of this, you're still conscious, right? You're not feeling your hands, your feet, hearing the sounds around you. You're still conscious. And inside of this ground, you can create a thought or an intention that then you bring outside of your consciousness. This is like, hey, it happens all the time. I want water, right? Some part of your body said, yay, I'm thirsty. So then you just kind of ignore that, where that came from, and you just, you say, well, what part of my body said that? Was it your knee? Was it your stomach? Was it your head? You know, so you receive these messages from your body that say, do this. You know, if there's an incoming baseball, you're going to go like this to either catch it or protect yourself from getting hurt. Like, something noticed it, told you, hey, do this, and then your body responded. So a lot of spirituality is getting you to the point where you hear all of these messages and ignore them. And then that's the state of nirvana or samadhi. And once you get there, then you can create a reality. And it's hard to create a reality when you're listening and being impinged upon all this noise and signals. So you, as a creator of your movement, thoughts, and experience, is kind of the point of spirituality. Cool. So, yeah, okay, cool. So before we were talking about consciousness. What did we say? Consciousness, identity, and existence. So consciousness is us like, hey, I'm aware. Identity is like, oh, I am aware. And existence is like, oh, I exist. I'm aware. And this is, kind of the same conversation I think in the Bible was had when the burning bush says, I am that I am. I forget who was talking to the burning bush, but I was like, I am that I am. That's real. Like, and then later I found out that the phrase was self-reflexive. So what's his name? They say Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, which is a really whack version of it, right? Let's get, what the Enlightenment did to spiritual truths is just sad. But that first I am that I am, that was pretty powerful. Or next. So that happens, all of that happens inside of a larger context of when I'm talking about the infinite spiritual field. We have the omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence, three of the traditional appellations or descriptors of, what needs to exist for God to exist, or just existence itself. And pretty much the omniscience is where science is like, I don't think so. They're like, yeah, infinity exists, and they say, well, there's a defined amount of energy in the universe, but they can't say it's not possible for more energy to exist. So science tries to, some interpretations of science try to cut you off and say, okay, like, only our universe exists. Like, you just deal with the universe and don't go outside of that. Outside of that, we can't verifiably say. But, that's where philosophy and religion come in. So we have that infinity, boom. Then we have the spiritual stuff. I'm just kind of putting spiritual there. Like, that's not like a rigorous scientific definition, but, where we have space, time, and energy, which is like the context. And inside of space, time, and energy, we have fields of awareness, entity, and existence. So like the vibration of a carbon atom, I'm not going to say that it's aware to the extent that we're aware, right? We're conscious, but like, it exists. Does it know it exists? I don't know. But it exists. So it's like, okay, exists in space. That's an awareness. It exists, across multiple points in time. So across the transformations of space, it consistently exists. So it's not just like instantaneous exist, not exist. So it persists across that. And then it has an energy charge. That's existence. Now, this is my thinking about this, and this is one of the only ways that, to me, all of this stuff makes sense. You got to start making these fundamental distinctions between, space and awareness, time and entity, and energy and existence, in order to methodically think about things. Now, some of these categories may change. You may disagree with them. That's fine. You may agree with them and say, hey, this is the hottest stuff ever. Hot. That's also, put that in the comments. And also, oh, I should have shrunk this a little bit. And then inside of that existence, or added to that ground, we have created beings like, people that are conscious. We have identity, and we have being. So consciousness is more of a self-reflexive, awareness, knowing that it's aware. Right? Just pure awareness, cool. But awareness, knowing that it's aware, is like, oh, I'm conscious. Like when you're awake, you're like, I'm awake. When you're asleep, something, you're aware that existence happens. You mean you just ain't paying attention to it. If somebody comes over and smacks you in the head, it's likely that you'll wake up. There's lots of videos on YouTube of people doing really immoral things to people that are asleep. And then they wake up and, go do, run into things, fall down, etc. So, they're aware but not conscious. They then become conscious, see what's going on. It's like, oh, I'm a thing. This thing is happening to me. I need to respond. So, you run out of the house naked because you think it's a fire, etc. Well, anyway, so you're conscious, and then you're conscious of your identity. So you're conscious that you are a specific entity, right? And then in addition to that, you're being. And being is more than existence in that being is a conscious assertion of a organism to do things outside of the laws of chemistry, right? All organisms obey biochemistry, at least, right? Organic compounds, carbon atoms, this is the stuff of life. Carbon, stuff of life. And the energetic capture from eating and from plants receiving light and the photons and translating that into energy, that energy capture allows an organism to do things to further its own energy capture. So you eat so you can go find food so you can eat, not just so you can just sit down and relax and watch awesome videos like this, but so you can eventually get up, go and get more food to continue life. So being, I'm defining as that which has a person or an organism or some conscious entity with its own identity to then use its power and energy supply and source to go in the world and get more energy so it can continue doing that. And that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That's a self-feeding person. That's a vicious, or rather a virtuous cycle. And so, for me, the purpose of life is to facilitate life. Your own, specifically, and, other people more generally, and, life on Earth and other planets, more generally. The destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars. All right, cool. So, sorry, I resized the presentation to take up the whole screen, so it, made stuff bigger, and it kind of cut this off. Oh wait, I think that's no, that we're close to the end of the recording. Let's see, 48 minutes in. Okay, not bad, under an hour. So mostly we're talking about this infinite reality and our participation in it. What we're going to talk about in the next couple sessions is, us as beings with intentions. We intend for something to happen, and then we discern, which is, once we intend something, we'll look at the space around it to see whether that is a decent ground for it. And then if and when it is, we then form plans or form more specific dimensions, and choose the qualities that we want within those. And those will be 3 separate trainings. Now, all of this being, identity, and existence, that's what happens in our brain. Our brain's some type of antenna, sensory signal that thinks, hey, we're getting all of this radio noise. some of it's me, some of it's not, and yeah, and then we expect, or then we experience that. Okay, cool. I see where we're going now, and then we have that. Now we're going to talk more specifically about us visualizing things, right? We were talking about the abstract, like where we fit in time in terms of the fundamental ground of space, time, and energy, omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, not in that order. And we were talking about, I was saying I can imagine a Rubik's Cube. People have different abilities to imagine these things. So some people, when they imagine an apple, like they see an apple, right? Red, they see the worm wiggling out of it. That's called like prophagia or something. And no, that's called aphasia. No, that's called phasia, right? And some people see like, just some kind of iconic red apple. Some people see, pretty much the same thing, but it doesn't have color. It might have, light. It may not. It might just be like a blank, iconic thing like this, but gray. And some people, they don't see anything, but they don't have now all of this see is really what I'm going to call a conscious experience of the visual sensation. Now, I have a problem with the word visualizing because I don't actually visualize things, but I can sense something, right? Like when I imagine, the other room in my house, like I can sense something. It's not external. Like I'm not saying like, all the vibes I'm getting from there. I know what's going on in that room. I'm saying that I have an experience, an internal experience that actually mimics the shape of that thing. And what I'm asserting now and in the future is that what's really happening is that it's not our visual system that's going on, it's our kinesthetic system. So the thing that allows us to feel what's happening to our body and to move our body, our effective and afferent nerves are connected to our proprioceptive and mechanoreceptive nerves. Proprioceptive is that which pushes out, and mechanoreceptive is that's what feels what's happening. So like, if you push on your skin or you push on your hand, when I'm pushing, my proprioceptive is saying my hand is pushing, and it's also saying my hand is being pushed. So that's, the proper was like where in the world is happening. And the mechanoreceptive is kind of the internal, it's tight, it's loose, it's tight or loose or relaxed or whatever. So what's happening when you visualize things is that you are internally creating or simulating. That's why I like the word simulate. You're simulating an experience, or you're simulating some reality that you, like it might not even be a reality. Like you can imagine a car just dropping out of the ceiling. That's simulating something. That's imagining something, but it's not reality. So what we'll talk about later in this course is trying to get better at that, because that is the thing that forms your intention. So if you want, when somebody's like, yeah, I got a taste for, Indian food. I got a taste for this, or do you want to go to an amusement park? I feel like getting out of the house. They're simulating a future of them experiencing that thing, and they're attracted to that, simulated future. So then they start moving and talking to you incessantly about how hungry they are. Cool. Now, so there's also, two forms of this phasia thing. So sorry that there's this isn't clear. This is the best thing I could find on the interwebs. So we have the top is phasia, and then on the bottom we have prophantasia. And the difference is where your simulations occur. Sometimes your simulations just occur in your head. Like I can imagine an apple, right? Let's use the apple. Here's a cat. So I can imagine a cat, and then I can open my eyes and imagine the cat, like Neo's cat that was a what did it do? Deja vu. Neo's deja vu cat. I can, I have a black cat. I can imagine my cat walking here and jumping up on my lap. This is something that I can like actually see it. Boom. So I have that. Is it, is it to the point where I have like Inception level abilities where I can actually project and change reality? No, that's a little too much. We'll talk about that a little bit. And so, when you're thinking about these, ask people. Just like, hey, when people say when you visualize, like, do you see color? Like, how clear is the shape? Like if I said, there's a red car coming down, can you imagine a red car coming down, or is it like kind of hard to do that? And you'll be able to, ask enough questions of people to see kind of where they at on this gauge. And one of the things to do is to, practice it, right? So there's two, things going on. So there's the thing happening and your experience of the thing happening. If I say, can you imagine a red car? If I can say, imagine a red jar of Kool-Aid busting through a wall. Some of you are going to remember the commercials. Some of you are going to be like, what kind of jar? Picture rather. What kind of jar? What kind of picture? Like, what color is the wall? How big is it? Is it just little? Is it big? Or is it supersized? How big is the wall? Is it a house? Is it an office? These are the things that you have to kind of answer for yourself, or go look at old Kool-Aid commercials. But people have differing levels of ability to project this type of thing into reality. Now, you can't not, like they say, don't think of a pink elephant. You can't not imagine a pink elephant. I'm not saying that you actually see a pink elephant, but you putting those words together to make an understandable thing or comprehensible thing. So I can say, did you think of a pink elephant? So you can actually say yes or no. You can recognize in your own internal experience whether that did or did not happen. And if you can recognize whether it did or did not happen, it happened or didn't, and you can understand that. So when I say don't think of a pink elephant, and you think pink elephant, you're like, oh, pink elephant. So that's actually your body creating that experience. Whether your conscious mind is aware and fully in control of that experience is a completely different thing. You can't not have a spatial awareness of the world. You can not experience it. Yeah, cool. And based on the based on how well you have traditionally and how well you have trained your brain to do and experience these types of things, if I say think of a square, you may think of a couple different aspects. You may think of the vertex or nodes of a square, so you might just have like, oh, there's 8 points. You may understand that there's edges, so you may have imagined a square that doesn't have any mass. It just has, like a cube, square. Let's say cube. Sorry, I said square. Now imagine a cube. So, or you may imagine something with all of the faces. Right? So that's why I said I liked imagining a Rubik's Cube, because I can imagine the faces, and because there's this really cool. You know what? Be right back. Let me pause this. All right, I'm back. So the Rubik's Cube. I read an article or part of a book that was like, yeah, the Rubik's Cube is cool, but how did they build it? And when the internet came out, and after Jennifer Lopez invented Google search, looked that up. I started looking for Rubik's Cube. I had that, and basically the inside of a Rubik's Cube has some pretty decent engineering. So like, how do you get a square to rotate, on all 3 axes and so forth. So this is just the inside of a Rubik's Cube. So when I imagine a Rubik's Cube, because I want to become a mechanical engineer, not really. or I just want to be able to have the fundamental thinking and spatial reasoning like mechanical engineers, really. I had to think about this. So, can you imagine this? Can you imagine a Rubik's Cube? Can you imagine turning it? Can you imagine turning it with your hands? Can you imagine turning it without your hands? You know, and not just rotating the whole thing, but actually manipulating it so that one slide slides around. And, you know, can you imagine how when you turn it halfway, that it has like a little triangle that sticks out on all four sides? Like, these are the things that weird people like me think about. But they're also the grounds of reality that we live in. You know, mechanical engineers, you know, they created hinges on your doors. They created, you know, levers to your laptop. They created the processes that allow your phone to get built. Smart dudes and women. Sorry. Cool. Now, so then we have, you know, this is all in the context of, we have the infinite, and then we're going to break down into the conceptual mental functions, and then we're going to break down to the individual parts. And I like to think about, you know, there's a thing where you say the forest and the trees, or the part whole. That dichotomy doesn't sit right with me, because it throws out a lot of the texture of reality. Like, it's not just a forest and a tree. It's a forest and a clearing, and a forest and a, you know, a sub part of a forest. I forget what the word is. You know, it's like in cars, you have transmission systems, you have the steering systems, you have, you know, all types of subsystems in your body. You have different organs. You have organ systems, like your endocrine system. You have your skin is an organ system. Blah blah blah. All of these things happen inside of your body, and it's not just like, you know, body cell. It's body brain cell, body neuron, you know, body lymphocyte. These are different types of cells that do different things and perform different functions in a in your body. So what we have here is what I'm going to be talking about is, like, you know, and this kind of shows focus is what we're highlighting, and the background is kind of like, you know, what's there but we're not talking about. So we're talking about the whole thing, right? The whole of existence, right? So we're talking about the whole of existence and a little bit of background of all of these, you know, parts and distribution. So when we talked about infinity, that was the focus. And then the background was, you know, us, our existence and the infinity and whatnot. And then we moved to talking about our experience, and then I guess that we could represent that as a point inside of here. Cool. And then we're talking about, or we're going to be talking about, the specific subdivisions of space, time, and energy. That's, you know, the parts and distributions and how that was cut up. And then later we can talk about, well, we're not actually going to talk about space, energy, matter, and time. Well, we did, but that's not the point, right? The point here is to talk about how we can think of a whole thing, cut that into pieces, and then think about the pieces. But we also have to worry about the cutting and how we divide up the world. Are we going to be worried about, you know, gravity, quantum mechanics, you know, the spins of atoms, and the nature of space-time? Or are we going to have a conversation about the fire that we have to create in order to accomplish big goals? Or how we should be more like water in being receptive to what other people are saying about us, so we can correct our faults? These are, you know, one's a very physical way of cutting up the world, one's a little more spiritual or mystical. Both of them are valid ways of cutting up the world, and both of the types of conversations perform different functions in our lives, and we have to be able to do both of those. Yeah. But when we're thinking about and imagining things, we lost that train of thought. Happens. Cool. Now, this ability to communicate or ability to create a reality in our heads. It's not just hallucinations. People do it, and they write stories about it. We read the stories. People create movies. People create comic books. People tell myths. People write plays. People act out dramas. All of these things are people imagining a reality and then simulating that in life. Some valiant examples are Star Trek's holodeck. I believe that's Lieutenant Yar. Rest in peace. She went and fought this simulation, and the simulation actually had some type of physical reality that the holodeck created, which had to take a lot. Like, transporting must take a lot of energy. Like, how can you not just instantly transmit from anyway? So the holodeck bet, and then we also have Professor X's Cerebro. Magneto created Cerebro. So Professor X goes in here, puts on this nice cool helmet that looks just like Magneto's helmet, but has wires out of it, to connect them to the physical aspect of this thing, and he then projects his consciousness and is able to touch other mutants and other people, etc., around the world. Cool. And then we also have in the Matrix, we have Morpheus showing Neo, their history of the world inside of what they call the construct. The construct was that big white nothing. For us, that's our imagination. For God, that's just God. God's so vast, she's never outside of herself. It's all me. So she says. So this is this is a simulation of the Matrix. This is a matrix, a local matrix, local host. Nice. And then in the movie Inception, people were able to connect to other people's consciousness and create and modify worlds to do all types of stuff. And I don't have the slide for it, but there's also that also happens in Doctor Strange, where so if you see the movie, you'll understand it. So these are all different ways that we have a vast field of experience, and then inside of that experience, we experience our consciousness, and inside of that experience, we create an intention, and that intention we can then create and do stuff with. Yeah, God, us. Seems legit. And then, okay, cool. So, bet. So now, at the end, we're going to talk about how to cultivate this. So, in my researches in, it's yogic breathing techniques, my experience as a swimmer, etc., I figured out a couple things. One is that your heartbeat speeds up because you're getting oxygen in, and it needs to move more blood past your through your lungs to get that into your body. So science and medicine has said when you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up, and when you breathe out, it doesn't. So the more you breathe in, the faster you breathe in, the more your heart rate speeds up. But in terms of trying to access and get to this world or universe in which you can create anything, you have to slow down your breathing so that you're not connected to the external world. So, and it's just not just a rhythm thing. What you have to do is you have to have slow belly breathing out. So you go. It's really important. Like when people say take a deep breath, blow your air out first. Right? Like if you had a cup of water, if you had a cup of milk, and you say, I want some water, you're not going to pour water into the milk and drink it and be like, yeah. So the milk is the old bad air that's just sitting in your lungs. The new air is what you want. So if you're going to take a deep breath, the first thing you should do is pour out your glass. So you breathe all the way out. That's a deep breath. And then, I used to swim. Listen, you want to know how to do some deep breath, get good at breathing? You go swim a couple hundred laps a day. And I'm telling you, the more you blow your air out, the more good air you can take in to then enable you to do the other thing that then enables you to breathe some more. So what you do is you want to have a very slow out breath. So, you want to slow down your heart rate. That's what, all the transcendental meditation and research and science of the like, you got to slow down your heart rate. And you do that by having less time breathing in. So you long, slow belly out breath. So you just breathe all the way out. Is going to start to slow down your heart rate. Like I already feel the difference in just, the last couple of breaths. So that's one. When you're meditating, do the slow rhythm breathing and whatnot, but focus a lot more on the out breath. You don't want to look at anything. So that's why people close their eyes, right? But you don't actually have to close your eyes. You just have to not look at anything. So you can defocus like you're, staring off into space. You can meditate by staring off into space. It just so happens that if you're staring off into space, in the space that you're used to that has stuff around you, you might think about that. So that is it might be an external trigger. So what usually people do is they close their eyes in order to stop that. You don't have to do that, right? Part of the exercise is that you do the out breaths to the point where you are no longer taking on this new information from outside. And that's what a lot of people haven't explained, or they don't know. I don't know whether they know it and not telling you. But the thoughts that go on in your in your head are a function of your rate of breathing. You change your rate of breathing, you change the thoughts that do and don't come inside your head. You slow down your breath enough, you'll fall asleep. Or if you slow down your breath enough, but you take in more air, you'll stay awake. You'll be in what they call a waking trance. And that waking trance is, that's what happens when you breathe in a way that thoughts no longer come up in your mind. So, let's just say it takes 10 hours of deep, slow out breaths before you can really expect your ability to not think more thoughts. And you have to put yourself in that slow out breath, belly, rhythmic breathing in order to do that. Now, at the end of the course, I'm going to compile all of this and have a nice, succinct, okay, here's the meditation, here's this. But we're not worried about all of that right now. But, go do some slow belly out breaths. Your eye focus, defocused, and the movement you have is yoga. You stretch. Now, a lot of people go into poses, they go between poses and whatnot. It might get sweaty, it might be hot yoga. That's not what we're talking about here. In stretching and yin yoga is what they call it. Basically, you go into a position and you teach your body to relax. So high-level yogis that can bend and are bendy and can do all types of pretzels and contortions, what they're doing is they have trained their body to relax and no longer hold tension. So then they're flexible. Because when you're stretching, what's actually happening is you have what's called residual muscle tension. Like your muscles are a little tense because they don't want you to go past a certain thing because you haven't been in that position for a while. So when you stretch, what you do is you train your body to stretch and you train your mind or your body to experience relaxation at that extreme range of motion. And you train your mind to not react to the tension that your body is creating so that you can stretch more. And then, you do this enough, what happens is you stop thinking about stuff. Mostly it's the belly breathing. But if you have a defocused horizon, you might stop thinking about stuff. If you stretch long enough in a particular position, you won't think about the stretch. You'll think into the stretch. Slightly different. And that's that. So what we talked about here was infinity's origin story. We talked about existence and the beginning and nature of space, time, and energy. We talked about being, and then we talked about us experiencing the infinity of imagination. What's this? Okay, cool. So what we're going to do in the next couple lessons, phase 1, or Asor, Keter, or I think Obatala, we're going to talk about intending, design, and why, and that's the topic. In this, we're going to talk about defining our requirements of what we want to create and how that is what creates the unity and coherence of our endeavor and the unity and coherence of us. And then in terms of a question, it's like, why are we doing this? Like, what do we accomplish to do this? And why is that valuable to us? Like, what's the purpose behind this thing? And then the ontology is space, and the direction is center. The ontology is space. That's what we were talking about. Space, time, and energy. So, and then the direction is centered. And this is more about the traditional tree of life, of which this is kind of this background image is a representation. You have 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then phase 2, what we'll be talking about, so I didn't update this slide. Let me go do that. Magic. All right. So in the discern survey and weather asking or topic, we're going to be considering the climate and life cycle of the thing. So if you have an intention, if you want to build a house, you gotta define, like, is this house going to be built for 20 years and we're going to take it down, or is it going to be built for 100 years? You're going to choose different materials. Like, is it going to last 100 years with the materials we have? Is there going to be an earthquake? Like, things that are outside of the specific definition of the requirements of the of what you're defining. And so that's question of whether, like, are the conditions right for this? The ontology is time, and that we went from space to time, so it's like in this space I create something that lasts over time. And then the direction is centripetal, which is kind of like weird. Like, why would it be centripetal? Because we're like thinking about that. I don't really have that much of a decent explanation, but I know it's not centrifugal, which is energy. And energy is going to be like energy pushes into existence. So maybe I have to think about that a little more. Anyway, and then the phase 3. I should have corrected that. I'll just leave that right now. And now, in the 3 phase, when we form, draft, or figure out like which way are we going to go, we start to satisfy the requirements of the original intention. So if somebody says, "I'm hungry," well, what kind of food do you want to eat? Mexican, Chinese, Thai, Jamaican, seasonless. Like what type of thing. And the big question is which asks about the possible options that you have, or possible configurations or sets of configurations for whatever it is. Like, sure, you want Jamaican, but is it oxtail or goat? Both. And then for ontology is energy, and ontology is the level we were talking about, omniscience, omnipotence, etc. And then in the direction is centrifugal, pardon that, pushing out into existence. So class 1 in the books, for the sacred science of succeeding. This is probably just going to be the you know, this is the big groundwork in mystical. After I'm done this, I'll probably have another course that's not going to cover all of these deep metaphysical things, but it'll be more like, okay, cool, now let's put this into action, and you'll get that. But I wanted everybody to have a deep grounding in the cosmological and cosmogonical context inside of which this next thing is going to be created. So thanks for playing. Hour 20. Thanks for staying.